nowhere to go but down here. Oh, and there it was.
Well, after you've gone to the well of the Yapapai Indian strap match, Brother Dude Jack, where do you go from here? I guess you have to start swerving people, bro. It's time to look at WCW Spring Stampede 2000 from April 16th at the United Center in Chicago, Illinois. This show was nominated by me, as it turns out. I actually looked at my list of nominees for pay-per-views, and I realized, oh my god, no one had actually nominated Stampede 2000 in all the years I had it open for nominations and everything. But I decided, since there are 5 Spring Stampedes, and up to this point I have covered 4 of them, I figured I had to do 2000 because, like Cody Rhodes says, I need to finish the story. So right after Uncensored 2000, which I've covered here recently, Sid Vicious turned heel on Hulk Hogan, and that was the biggest story going on in WCW at the time until the Great Reset, because Eric Bischoff and Vince Russo are back and working together. Bischoff around this time was called back to rejoin the company as a creative consultant. Meanwhile, Vince Russo was brought back into the fold, regaining his status as head of creative. Remember, he started out in late 99 working for WCW, left in early 2000 after what he considered to be, an unkosher working environment for what he expected going in as head of creative. So he and Bischoff, they're back. They're a two-headed monster, and they're working together here on a united front. And the way the company celebrates this fact is by doing a whole week of clip shows on the week of April 3rd. Nitro and Thunder are basically turned into retrospectives of what the old WCW is like, narrated by Tony Schiavone and Mark Madden, as they would openly speculate about the future of the company under a new creative regime. There was anticipation, elation, cautious optimism, cynicism, just all across the board for emotions here. I don't recall watching these clip shows as they aired in 2000, but watching them again in preparation for watching Spring Stampede here, I'm blown away at just the transparency and just the openness with which they talk about how wrestling is this, fictional world, and there's writers that are in charge of this, and how, boy, WCW's been in a real free fall for the last, umpteen years, but thank God this new head of creative, this new writing team will fix things, surely. And just for them to be so open about that, and just for Mark Madden to openly say, hey, this could be great, but then again, Bischoff and Russo, they may not get along and it might suck. Like, for them to say that, I thought was just very brazen of them. I thought it was very eye-opening and shocking for them to be just so like, hey, this is all a work, it's all a show and everything. When, today in wrestling, we see a lot of spots that are kind of winks and nods to the fact they're all but telling you that wrestling is a work, but I don't even think today, if we're as open about it as wrestlers can be, nobody straight up says, oh, this is a work, this is being written, there are writers. It's a whole other level of pulling back the curtain that I don't think is, I don't know, it just doesn't jive well for me. So all previous storylines that had been brewing around this time were put on ice. Then on April 10th on Nitro, Russo and Bischoff declared a new era in WCW. They stripped everyone of their championships, including the TV title, which was hereby retired as a result of this, and new champs would be crowned at the pay-per-view less than a week later. Also, everyone was officially divided up into 2 camps. There was the New Blood, which is a group made up of the lower and mid-card wrestlers who hadn't been utilized to their full potential, some on the younger side, some much older. Then there was the Millionaires Club, made up of the established names like Hogan, Nash, Flair, Luger, Sting, DDP, and Sid. They were kind of creating a culture war here, and kind of a faction warfare based on, what the internet was saying about WCW at the time, and what the newsletters were saying. And as somebody who had the internet in 2000 and was very deep in the online chatter about that, I was well aware of that, but I'm not entirely sure how aware the general wrestling public was. Maybe people who didn't have access to the internet and people who didn't get into the minutia of the backstage goings on in this company. And of course, hindsight being what it is, and my memory being is what it is, it's kind of hard to really remember that. But I just remember seeing this play out and feeling oh, this is being kind of forced, because they know what we know about the whole idea of, oh, it's these younger talent, these mid-card talent that never gets a chance to get in this main event because they're being held down presumably by these older names, these old main eventers with their fat contracts taking up all this space. And so it was definitely a reflection of that, but I felt that by kind of forcing now this division where it's like, it's going to be this versus this, instead of just organically just letting these younger talents kind of get more integrated, which is what happens, but it's under the umbrella, it's under this veneer of like, oh, it's young versus old, and we're going to take it out on you old bastards that really ruined our careers and stuff. But you look at the new blood, first of all, it's a very confusing group because not only is it like 3 times the size of the Millionaires Club, it's also full of a bunch of people who are like, there's a reason that they're not going to be in the main event. Like, there's some characters who just like they're not going to be in the main event. They're not upper tier stars. And there's people who have like been in the company for a long time and they may have already reached their peak and wasn't going to get any higher. Like, you see Brian Knobbs, you know, he's in the new blood, but he's almost as old as the people in the Millionaires Club. And then you got like Terry Funk, who doesn't really fit into either category because he's too old to be in the new blood and he's too broke to be in the Millionaires Club. So where does he really fit into all this? Then you have all this like infighting within the new blood, which is like, you can have infighting in a stable, but I feel you need to kind of like, if you're going to debut a new kind of group or a faction, there kind of needs to be a unified front in all this. And there's, from the get-go, there isn't. And it just makes you wonder, like, what is the end game with all this infighting we're already seeing here? I remember watching this as it happened and being really blown away, first off, by the revelation of Vince Russo coming out. I didn't know what he looked like beforehand. Seeing him and Bischoff have that moment I thought was interesting. Them stripping the championships, doing a full reset, I think was a good idea. If they wanted to try and like really hammer the point home that this is like a new era, then yeah, strip everyone clean of the championships. I thought it was just weird that like, yeah, some storylines that are just like, oh, Sid heel, that's not an issue anymore. Luger and Flair heels, oh, not so anymore, because now like they're on a unified front with like Hogan, who they'd been feuding with and everything, and now they're all baby faces again. I just thought that was really weird that whole, you know, congregation of wrestlers happened and we're supposed to believe, oh, it all makes sense that they're kind of unified now. I just remember like being very curious about it. I remember looking at the landscape in WCW and thinking, okay, well, if it's not these, you know, Millionaires Club folk, who else? Who in the new blood is like ready to kind of like jump up and take that spot? I feel there were maybe 1 or 2 people, but it was it was kind of hard for me to think about, well, who's gonna fill this gap? Who's gonna be the first person to kind of like step up and challenge the Millionaires Club and have it make sense? Also, it felt like a big retread of the NWO gang warfare we'd already seen plenty of in WCW, right on down to these spray paint attacks. Instead of NWO, it's NB now. Totally different. And another idea about the group was the whole concept was Vince Russo is massively biased against the Millionaires Club. He feels that specifically Ric Flair and Hulk Hogan are the 2 people who like the good old boys club who really pushed him out of WCW in the first place. So he's very biased against the Millionaires Club, to the point where in this April 10th episode of Nitro, you see some of the Millionaires Club guys coming out, their music's cut off, there's no pyro, then out comes Buff Bagwell with the whole show, the lights, the music, the pyro. But then later in that same episode, those same old timers whose entrances were cut off and no pyro, they would come out later with the full entrance and pyro. No consistency. Like I said, Russo has it out for Ric Flair in particular. He went and stole his Rolex this past week. Bischoff fighting with Hogan now after years of carrying water for him. He ends up driving the white Hummer and T-bones Hogan's limo that April 10th episode of Nitro, all to help build the big feud between Hogan and Billy Kidman. Going on to the show now, Spring Stampede begins with Bischoff, Russo, Kidman, and Torrie Wilson backstage. Bischoff is worried that Hogan let himself out of the hospital today, but nobody else seems to be worried. 12,556 folks packed the United Center. 115,000 pay-per-view buys makes it tied for the most bought WCW pay-per-view in its final year, tied with Sold Out back in January. Tony Schiavone, Scott Hudson, Mark Madden on commentary here. Madden sporting a black eye after he got the hell beat out of him by Tank Abbott the previous Thunder. They explain that there will be a lot more leeway going forward about the enforcement of rules and what will constitute a disqualification going forth. The refs have been told to, hey, let the guys fight. Basically, this is the dawn of the new era in WCW where, hey, low blows, weapons, like it's all kosher, it's all legal. The referee's basically only there to count the 3, barring some extreme circumstances. And you know, this is definitely a stylistic choice in terms of like the philosophy of how they want to dictate their matches. You can see that even from like a couple of months prior to this in WCW, it is far and away, which already was kind of lax on rule enforcement, I feel, it is even more blatant here in in this new era of WCW. And to me, it just kind of reeks of desperation. It's just like, hey, what's working for WWF at the time? Oh, it's like a lot of rule breaking. It's a lot of weapons and stuff. But even those situations oftentimes had like referees and disqualifications attached to it. This, not so much. It's all just pretty much like open hardcore matches with some extreme exceptions. One of Tony Schiavone's opening lines here is, "We have no champions!" But by the end of the night, we will have some. The show begins with a match in the Tag Team Championship Tournament as the Mamelukes take on Team Package. Ric Flair's in his street clothes for this matchup, not because he was dealing with a lot of self-confidence issues at the time, but because Flair says it's a street fight. It isn't. Luger and Flair each take their freaking time coming to the curtain here. Before the match begins, though, Vince Russo pops out and says, "It's not fair these two veterans are going against two rookies, bro." Way to bury your own guys, by the way. So he brings out the boys, and it's the Harris twins. Bleh. Now it's 4-on-2. Things look dire for the guys who were heels 2 weeks ago until they fire back up. Flair with the figure 4, but he immediately lets go for some reason and gets up to be kicked by Vito. Schiavone describing this predicament as one of the biggest challenges Flair and Luger have ever faced. And I'm like, really? Nature Boy peeled off the top rope. He's able to make the tag, but the referee misses it. Elizabeth hits Disco on the outside, but the camera totally misses that. Out come a couple of guys looking vaguely Mafia-esque as they drag Disco away. Luger making his comeback, waits forever for Ron or Don to come off the top rope so he can intercept him or him. Johnny the Bull also takes forever up top, but this time he takes Luger down for a moment. Luger fights back and puts Johnny in the torture rack to win and advance. I give it 1.5 stars out of 5. The match was okay. I thought it did a good job at kind of building and establishing early on the kind of struggle the Millionaires Club is going to have to go through to win these tournaments on the evening, but it also runs the risk of making these New Blood members look really weak at the onset. There is definitely a tiered system in the New Blood as to like who's expendable, who are bodies to be destroyed by the legends, and who are the upper ones like, Jeff Jarrett, Vampiro, and Booker and so forth. Mean Gene backstage with new signee Mike Awesome, the surprise 8th man in the U.S. title tournament. He's facing the Cat tonight. He plans on taking each of his 9 lives and beating each one of them up. Judo, Taibo, whatever bow you want to talk about. If you're some karate, he'll take them all down. Bam Bam Bigelow comes in and talks mess, then walks away, then gets jumped by Awesome. More on that later. Big fight feel on our next matchup, folks, as the Mouth of the South, Jimmy Hart, takes on Chicago radio legend Mancow Muller. This whole thing began a few weeks ago on Mancow's show when Jimmy Hart and Hulk Hogan were there to promote Spring Stampede, and Jimmy beats up Mancow during the show. Mancow says he wants an eye for an eye. Can you imagine this being the same kind of match as Rollins Mysterio? Jimmy Hart, accompanied by a big dude named Hale, he's wearing a Howard Stern t-shirt as well, says that after the match he'll still be the world's greatest manager and Mancow will be a Howard Stern wannabe. Ooh, them's fighting words. Mancow gets a great reception in Chicago, but his theme is blaringly loud and makes the commentary damn near inaudible. You're not a real shock jock if you don't have your own band of weirdos accompanying you to the ring, and Mancow definitely has that with Al Roker Jr., Brian the Whipping Boy, and Turd. Mancow cutting a very rah-rah Chicago promo. Kind of reminds me of CM Punk's last couple of AEW promos before he left. He jumps Jimmy and the match begins. Madden screams catfight. Hart with a low blow. He takes over, hits him with a kind of slam as a Mancow chant erupts. Jimmy goes up top at Mancow, pulls Slick Johnson in the way. Cow taking down Jimmy. The brawl continues until Hale gets involved. He picks up the DJ and throws him down onto his crew. Hart waves off Hale for the rest of it, but Mancow grabs a chair. He decks Jimmy with it and makes the cover for the win. I give this match a 1/2 star out of 5. I will give the 1/2 star because Mancow, and credit to him for the big bump he took to the outside from Hale going down onto his crew on the floor. I will not begrudge WCW for doing a match like this because Lord knows the size and the impact of Mancow's audience and his reach in Chicago. Like, yeah, it makes sense to have him be part of the show. And dare I say, having like a silly little brawl, kind of a manager fight between him and Jimmy Hart. But like beyond that, like, what do you expect me to rate this match? But then out comes Billy Kidman of the New Blood. He lays out Jimmy and stomps on him good, sending a message to Hulk Hogan. Elsewhere backstage, Vince Russo chewing out the Mamelukes and the Harris twins, calling them losers, telling them to get out of his sight. Real strong booking for the New Blood here. On we go to our first match in the U.S. Championship Tournament now as Scott Steiner takes on That's the Wall, brother! That was the big moment that the Wall had a couple of weeks ago on Nitro. He shows up on top of a hotel building very, very far away from the ring and from Hogan, and then nothing ever came of that thanks to the reboot. Scott coming out to Steinerized, which is really weird when juxtaposed with the Big Papa Pump look. There's lots of punching back and forth until Scott hits a low blow on the Wall and hits a suplex, but Wall comes back and takes over. They fight on the outside, Wall setting up a table. Scott tries to fight off. He temporarily blinds the Wall, who mistakenly grabs the referee and chokeslams him through a table. A new referee comes in and disqualifies the Wall, and Steiner wins. I give it 1 star out of 5, and wow, that ending sure was dumb. I'm pretty sure we saw the Wall make direct eye contact with the referee. He was blindingly chokeslamming, I would say. But at least now we've got kind of like a benchmark, a standard for what counts and what will get a wrestler disqualified in this brave new era of WCW. You can do low blows on the live long day, you can hit each other with weapons, but by God, don't hurt them referees. Mean Gene interviews Ernest Miller backstage about Mike Awesome. As he's chatting, we see a shadow lurking behind the curtain. Suddenly, Bam Bam comes back and jumps the cat, and now he takes his place in the tournament all of a sudden in this next matchup against Mike Awesome. By the way, let's talk about Mike Awesome for a minute. He debuted last Monday on the big reboot episode while he was ECW champion, and I remember this being the most controversial and really the coolest moment of that episode of Nitro, in my opinion. He left ECW over a lack of pay, and this led to a lot of legal wrangling the day of April 10th as far as could he show up with the belt? Could he be regarded as the ECW champion? Could they mention his upcoming title defense? All these different things. But I remember it being a really big moment. That was kind of one of the last cool defections that I remember seeing happen during the Monday Night War on either direction. And if you want to hear more about that moment and Awesome's whole run in WCW, I do have a video about that right here. Light ECW chants break out as these two start to brawl. They're in the ring for maybe 20 seconds before Bam Bam goes out and Awesome dives to the outside after him. Bigelow goes over the barricade, Awesome dives after him. Back in the ring, Bigelow makes a comeback, but then out comes the cat who kicks Bam Bam out of the ring. He grabs the mic and says it's time to dance. Hit my terrible network dub. He puts on his red shoes and starts to dance, but Awesome obliterates him with a clothesline, the big top rope splash, and the win. I'm going to give this one 2 stars out of 5. We get a bit of that Mike Awesome vibe in this matchup, showing why I thought he was so, pardon the phrase, awesome. And of course, Bigelow, he's great, jam-up guy, but it does get a bit messy and confusing by the end. Why is Bigelow allowed to just be a new participant in this tournament? And why does Miller get his spot back mid-match? And nothing comes of that. Why is Miller allowed to take the pinfall? It's just, there's a lot of confusion at the end of this match. Backstage, Bischoff still stressing out, Russo still relaxed, and Kidman and Tori still canoodling. Elsewhere, Mean Gene with Shane Douglas and Buff Bagwell, who are very confident about winning the tag title tournament. Buff says, just think about it. The franchise and Buff Daddy. You figure it out. Exactly. We go to that match now as Bagwell and Douglas take on Harlem Heat 2000 in the tag title tournament. Shane Douglas had not been seen in WCW since Sold Out back in January. He was trying to leave for the World Wrestling Federation alongside Benoit, Malenko, Guerrero, and Saturn, but then it turns out the Federation didn't want him, so he basically sat on the sidelines for a while until April 10th when he returned to begin this feud with someone who he has real deep bad blood with IRL in Ric Flair, going all the way back to the early 90s over how Douglas felt that Flair treated him as the booker at the time. Fists are flying at the onset. Things begin to go Harlem Heat's way after a big spinebuster by Big T, complete with the most amazing grunt I've ever heard. Bagwell gets some space and tags in the franchise, who goes on a big hot tag run, but he gets double teamed as the big man Cash on the outside beats up Buff. Douglas takes Big T to Dick Kick City, has to heave up Stevie for the Pittsburgh plunge, and pins to win and advance. I give it 1.5 stars out of 5. This is, this the big theme of the night here, really short matches. I don't think there's one match that goes over 8 minutes on this entire card, and this is one of the shorter matches you will see on this night, so it doesn't have enough time to really kind of get into that second gear and make it interesting. I will say, though, this is really, the beginning of the end for Harlem Heat 2000. You are not going to see much of them further on in WCW this year. Speaking of Harlem Heat, we hear from Booker for a minute backstage before he has his U.S. title tournament match against Sting, who, by the way, is is the only Millionaires Club member in this tournament. Booker, by the way, is an interesting case because he is kind of a lone rogue within New Blood, like that dissension I was talking about earlier, where he definitely plays the face side of things, and he still has that axe to grind with Harlem Heat 2000, who are still technically on his side in the New Blood, but he cost them a match in the days leading up to Spring Stampede, which Russo did not like, or maybe it was Bischoff who didn't like it. Nice back and forth to start things off. Booker gets some offense in. Sting evades some attacks and hits back. On the outside, Booker's hurled into the camera guy, then Sting is dropped on the announce desk a moment later. Booker's spending a lot of time working Sting over. He tries to come back. Booker cuts him off with an axe kick. Sting still fighting it. We get the spinneroonie. Sting goes for a suplex and it's blocked. Booker goes for one of his own. It gets countered into a scorpion death drop. The pin and the win. Sting advances. Then after the bell, Booker brings Sting back into the ring to show some respect, which Sting accepts. I give this one 3 stars out of 5. It is one of my favorite matches of the night. It's one of the best matches of the night in terms of in-ring quality. Also, it's one of the few on the evening where you don't see some screwy bullshit finish, so maybe that has to play into it a little bit. Also, you see more signs of like why Booker is that outlier in the New Blood. He's doing kind of the babyface thing when everyone else is kind of leaning heel, so it does a good job of, again, building Booker's character. Backstage, Mean Gene chatting with Eric Bischoff, Billy Kidman, and Torrie Wilson. Bischoff clearly sweating the news that Hogan could be on his way back, but he reminds himself it's just a rumor. Kidman says if Hogan does come back, he'll make him suck air through a tube. On we go to our next match in the tournament as William Man takes on Vampiro, who just turned heel on Sting last week. As we mentioned in the Uncensored 2000 review, Vampiro was a babyface for a while up to this point, and he and Sting were the brothers in paint for all of like 2 weeks before April 10th when Vampiro turned on him. Vamp is aggressive from the start here and once again shows you can powerbomb Kidman once. Kidman goes on a good run but is soon cut off with a suplex. Another powerbomb attempt cut off, but Vamp shrugs it off and kicks Kidman down. As the match continues, we cut to the garage where someone's rolling in. It's Hulk Hogan. He is back. He power walks to the backstage area, makes his way to the arena. He grabs Kidman out of the ring and just beats the hell out of him for a couple of minutes. He goes to slam him through the announce table. It doesn't break, so let's do it again. Hogan drags Kidman back into the ring, allowing Vampiro to make the cover and get the win. I also give this match 3 stars out of 5. I think that even though on the surface this is a heel versus heel matchup by all accounts, still a good showing with these two. They have good chemistry and it shows a little bit of what I believe like the New Blood movement was kind of all about, where it's like, hey, focus on the younger guys, the ones who have the talent but maybe don't have the screen time and everything. And so for them to kind of like showcase these two, it was fine, I thought. But boy, Hogan getting his heat back after being, hospitalized in that white Hummer crash less than a week after it happened is certainly a choice. Backstage at the Evil Base, Russo walks out and leaves Bischoff alone, which seems pretty smart. Elsewhere, where's Bischoff? Where's Bischoff? Where's he at? Bischoff! Where's Bischoff, brother? Hogan finally kicks in the door to the Bischoff office and corners him, but in come the police alongside Vinny Rue. The cops then all pull their guns on him, like, damn, is shit about to get real here? Then we get this very long single shot. It's very well done here, where Hogan's being let off in cuffs. Terry Taylor's in disbelief. Terry Funk walks in and chats with him. We can hear Hogan and Bischoff's breathing over them because they're still mic'd.
Fourth door up on the right. Turn right into Doritos. Yeah.
Catering?
Yes, sir.
Screw him.
Funk goes into catering and asks for Norman Smiley. Everyone points to the bathroom where Smiley is hiding in a stall. Funk corners him and the fight for the vacant hardcore championship is on. By the way, it's worth pointing out the way this match was made took place on Thunder a few days before, where there was a 3-team matchup and the winning team would go on to fight each other for the hardcore title. Terry and Norman won by Terry pinning his own partner Norman. They brawl in the bathroom, in catering, in the kitchen. Then Funk just blasts Norman in the head with a damn laptop. Norman climbs up a ladder, hangs from a giant pipe as Terry places a table underneath him, then clocks him with a chair, and down goes Norman. He comes back with some chair shots as they make their way back to the arena. Terry taking multiple dinks to the head as they make their way to the ring. Norman doing the big wiggle, which leads to him taking more chair shots. Funk setting up a ladder, but in comes Dustin Rhodes, still with an axe to grind with the Funker. He hits Terry, a pile driver on the chair. Dustin on the second rope with evil intentions, but Terry puts the boot up. A seesaw spot where the ladder doesn't go quite the way that it should. Terry just slings the whole ladder onto Smiley and covers them to win and become the new hardcore champion. I give this one 2 stars out of 5. It's a silly, hardcore romp. I think Terry and Norman do well in this. Maybe a few too many headshots for my personal liking, but still was a fun kind of chaos that I enjoyed. I've talked before about it, and I'll say it again, how good Norman fits in this hardcore division, becoming this kind of comedy act. I mean, it really did wonders for his career. It really can't be overstated how much that particular angle helped him out. But like I said, with Terry, he is kind of a champion on an island unto himself here, because he doesn't really belong with the New Blood or the Millionaires Club. Tony Schiavone says, when you order Spring Stampede, you get a mouse pad. That's right, a mouse pad. Backstage, Vince Russo continues to berate Booker for earlier and says he needs Booker to do a favor for him, but I'm pretty sure that does not get resolved here tonight. Awesome versus Steiner up next in a semifinal for the U.S. title tournament. Scott showing his power early on, but Awesome is able to bust out a lot of his high-flying moves. Suddenly we hear a big pop from the crowd, and we see Kevin Nash getting some revenge on Mike Awesome, decking him with a crutch. The Steiner recliner, Awesome submits, and Steiner advances to the finals. I'm going to give it 1 star out of 5. There's really not much to this match in terms of time, but they do try and pack as much as they possibly can in their 3-minute span they have with this matchup. And it does a good job at least of furthering the storyline with Nash and Awesome, since it was Kevin Nash that Awesome beat down on his debut. Backstage, Russo shouts some more, this time at Dustin Rhodes for failing to cost Funk the hardcore title. That's not what the script was, bro. I wrote all your lines when you was Goldust, bro. In the next semifinal match, you got Vampiro versus Sting as the brothers in paint finally square off. Vampiro strikes first, but Sting's having none of it. Action goes to the outside where Sting attacks Vamp with a chair. Sting with a big splash off the top rope. Follows up with the old dive into the barricade cutoff, a guaranteed miss every time. In the middle of this matchup, Schiavone with an amazing line on commentary that really encapsulates what WCW is all about this time.
It's like a train wreck every time you turn around.
Vamp successfully completes a flying nothing to reposition Sting for his next attack. Works over the Stinger some more. He goes up top and goes for a flying something. Sting shrugs it off and hits the Scorpion Death Drop, follows it up with a Deathlock. Vampiro taps and Sting wins, and he goes to the finals as well. I give it 2 stars out of 5. This one is a little bit rougher compared to the previous 2 matches on this side of the bracket. I think Kidman and Vampiro worked better together. I think Sting and Booker worked better together. So this one wasn't quite as good, which is unfortunate considering this is the main storyline the feud we're trying to build with these two, but things would be far from over between the former brothers in paint. MGO interviews DDP. Can he beat JJ? Dallas says as much as he wants to become a 3-time champion, he wants to beat up Jarrett even more after what he did to Kimberly last week, hitting her with that guitar. He tells Kim she'll get a shot at Jarrett tonight. On we go now to a 6-man match for the vacant Cruiserweight Championship. You have the Artist, Crowbar, Juventud Guerrera, Lash Leroux, Shannon Moore, and the newcomer Chris Candido, who debuted last month at Uncensored. 3 count gets an entrance, and the rest of the guys just run in and start fighting. Crowbar seems perfectly fine after being chokeslammed off the set like 3 weeks ago. Juventud wearing a shirt that is soaking wet. The format is 2 legal men, everyone else in corners. This has major clusterfuck potential. Crowbar taking his own bumps as Lash drops down to get ready for a big move. So looks like a big weird dance off to me. Lash and Hoovy counter a bunch of times before we see the Hoovy driver. The pin's broken up. Daphne gets involved. She accidentally Franken-screamers her own man. We get lots of dives here. Suddenly we see Shane Helms dancing in the ring. He's not even in the match. David Flair runs in, does a dance, and chases him off. What the hell? Candido missing a flying headbutt. The Artist tries to capitalize. Suddenly in comes his longtime partner Tammy Sitch making her debut. She shoves the Artist off and onto a chair. Candido pins and wins to become the new Cruiserweight champion. It takes ages for the camera to get a shot of this newcomer's face. All we see for a while is hair. Paisley gets in the ring. The 2 ladies have a cat fight. Shannon Moore and Charles Robinson break it up. The girls give each of them testicular claws. The fight resumes until Candido and Tammy flee. I'm going to give it 1 star out of 5. This match was certainly something. There is a lot of information coming your way in this matchup here. It's already really short and condensed. There's maybe about 20 to 30 seconds of actual wrestling in this thing. Everyone in this match, or almost everybody, has a corner man, so there's all these extra bodies coming in. Not to mention, Candido is the newest guy of the bunch here, trying to get over as kind of this new face of the Cruiserweight division, and he also has somebody debuting to be on his behalf. There's just so much going on here. It's all kind of a mess, unfortunately, and it's really not at all in the same kind of spirit of what the Cruiserweight division used to be about, certainly at this point. And oh yeah, the catfight was pretty stupid, even by 2000 standards. Backstage, Okerlund interviewing the chosen one, Jeff Jarrett, who threatens to slap Gene's liver spots off of him. He reiterates he is the chosen one, he is the favorite of Russo and Bischoff, and he will become the new world champ, you Jarrettall slapnuts. It's time now for the finals in the Tag Championship tournament as Team Package take on Shane Douglas and Buff Bagwell. Here everybody gets the full entrances again with pyro. What bias against the Millionaires Club? Vince Russo, bat in hand, walks out to accompany the new blood, heads over to join commentary for this matchup. Scott Hudson saying that Douglas is toying with the package. His words, not mine. Flair gets tagged in and is all over Shane for a moment until Buff gets in. Flair gets worked over for the bulk of this matchup here. This match has got to be some major catharsis for Shane Douglas here. At one point he's got Flair in the corner, he goes, "Fuck you, Flair!" Luger with the hot tag. Flair gets the figure 4 on Shane. Russo leaving the announce desk. Buff goes for the blockbuster on Flair, but he hits Shane instead. Russo yoinks the ref out of the ring. He and Nick Patrick get into a fight, all while Brian Adams and Brian Clark, Chronic, arrive. They take out Luger with the high times. That allows the new blood to win the match and the tag team titles. I'm going to give it 2.5 stars out of 5 up until the finish, in which once again way too much stuff is going on. I thought this was a competent enough match. I for one though am pretty much done with all these surprises. Backstage with Scott Steiner, who says he represents himself, no one else, not even the new blood. He goes to the ring, then we hear Sting's promo. Half his face paint is chipped off. He looks very tired. He says Steiner will be the next casualty in Russo and Bischoff's war, and says Big Papa Pump cannot run from the Millionaires Club members for very long. On we go to that tournament final match for the U.S. Championship. Sting starts off hot, dives after him to the outside. He wants to follow up from the top rope, but Scott puts the knees up. Steiner hitting those suplexes and clotheslines on Sting. Goes for a suplex on the top rope, but Sting fights him off. Series of clotheslines and a Stinger splash. Goes for one more, but the referee gets smooshed. He goes for it again, but then suddenly Vampiro shows up to the canvas. He's been dragged to hell. Welcome to hell. He's in hell, the commentary says. Boy, sure looks drab for hell. Vampiro and Sting emerge moments later with strawberry jam pouring out of the Stinger's mouth. Scott puts in the Steiner recliner. The ref calls the match, and Big Papa Pump is the new U.S. champion. 2 stars out of 5 for me on this one, and wow, another crazy-ass finish. Wow, I'm shocked. Shocked, I tell you, that something crazy and outlandish would happen here to conclude this matchup, because Lord knows there's no precedent to that anywhere in this show so far. The commentary team kills time so the crew can replace the canvas. They're about to throw to the hype package, and suddenly you hear Schiavone go, "Oh, there's Tank Abbott," which sounds kind of foreboding. In your main event for the vacant World Championship, Jeff Jarrett takes on Diamond Dallas Page. As I mentioned, on April 10th, there was the big championship reset. Jarrett got the first dibs to be #1 contender for the championship. There was a mini tournament on that Nitro to crown the opponent for Jarrett in the finals. DDP ultimately wins the tournament by beating Sting, thanks to some Vampiro betrayal. Then Jarrett El Kabongs Kimberly after the match, adding some more heat to this one. Jeff Jarrett goes on a long walk down the hall before coming out to the ring. DDP and Kim go on an even longer walk though. The match begins. DDP with a DDT. He dives onto Jarrett on the outside, gets Kimberly to slap Double J in the face. They fight out in the crowd. Only one camera is able to get any kind of action for a long time though. The brawl makes its way back into the ring eventually. Jarrett hits a superplex. He brings in a chair and smacks DDP in the back with it. The referee decides to take it away after a while, and Jarrett just seems cool with it. Jarrett continues to attack the injured back, but DDP keeps fighting, hits a big powerbomb on Double J, and then we see Eric Bischoff arrive. Kimberly interjects herself into the match, which allows Page to start making a comeback. Referee is lightly touched and temporarily loses control of his central nervous system, which allows Jarrett to hit DDP with a belt, and we get a kick out. Bischoff makes his way to the ring. Kimberly's got the guitar. Jarrett's got DDP in the figure 4 for a while. He moves on to the sleeper. Page is firing up. He reverses the sleeper as Bischoff and Kim come up to the apron. DDP with his favorite move on the planet, the Diamond Cutter. Shoulders back, chest out, and now Kimberly wants a piece. Wow, this is so cool, and in no way is going to be a misdirection. Oops, spoke too soon. Jarrett hits the stroke, the cover, the win, and Jeff Jarrett is finally the new world champion. One word, wow. The New Blood celebrates in the ring with all their newly won championships as the show fades to black. This one gets 3 stars out of 5 for me. I thought this was a well done enough match. Swerve at the end aside, I thought Jarrett and Page did a really good job in this one. But my question is, with all these swerves, when every match has some kind of interference or some kind of swerve, bro, like, where is the emotional impact? Where's the oomph? I'll tell you where the oomph is in like 2 weeks from now when David Arquette wins the world title, baby! My grade for WCW Spring Stampede 2000 is a C-. This show is not great, but it is leaps and bounds better than Uncensored 2000. So I will give the new creative regime credit where it's due on that one. Yeah, there's a lot of screwy bullshit finishes on this show, interference and swerves, plenty, and like a lot of new information coming at you with like debuts and everything, but at least the matches themselves are generally more interesting than what we saw in the previous month. Things are about to get even more interesting come Slamboree though, when there are even more swerves, bro. But hey, I already covered Slamboree 2000 on this channel a while ago, so that review is ready for you if you're ready for it. Well, by the time we go to our next classic review, we are going to be deep in the weeds of our return of Hulkamania, a month of content dedicated solely to the Hulkster. And so we're going to go back to the year 1993 for what was then his swan song from the World Wrestling Federation. I'm talking about King of the Ring. But until then, I'm Brian Zane, and I'll see you next time.